The thing I hate most about teaching is starting class. Because I love watching people just interact like this. It's just really fun. And I like watching people check their email and their cell phones and stuff like that. I always say something at the beginning of class. But I won't mention any names. Lisa. I want to thank Jim for the talk that he gave. That was a really, really well done and finely tuned overview of, I think, everything that's important that you need to know about the next 4 or 5 years. I really enjoyed that. I can't think of a more important talk that you're going to hear today than that talk. And I want to emphasize just a couple of things that he said and add 1 or 2 things to it. First thing he said was take control. That is so important. You need to be proactive in this. You just sort of can't sit by passively and think that you're going to go up and get tenure and promotion. You just can't do that. What you need to do is go to the faculty handbook when you get home and find the section on T&P. It's everything that's related to T&P. Print it out and read it and study it. That is your roadmap. That sets out your goals, what you need to achieve. Okay? So learn from that, live it. Okay? Second thing is, you have to be productive. And I'm not talking just about in terms of research. I'm talking about in terms of service and outreach and teaching as well. You have to be able to document what you've done. And as long as you've been productive and you can document it, you will be safe. Because nobody can argue with those data. It doesn't matter whether people in your department like you or not. You have got those data to support it. But you've got to have those data. You've got to be busy, and you've got to be productive, and you've got to be able to document it. Joni said something back here that was important. I don't know if everybody heard her, but sometimes you get turned down for tenure promotion because you don't put together a very good packet. You didn't get very good advice. And so what you need to do is make sure you are working closely with your chair and other people in your department who have gone up recently for these kinds of things and get advice from them. Ask to see their dossiers. They'll be more than happy to share it with you. Don't copy it though. Okay? Don't copy. Just get some ideas. Let the ideas flow. Let them settle for a while. See what you can distill. That's very, very important. Get as much information as possible. Now, having said all that and listened to Jim for the last hour and a half, I want to tell you not to worry about it. Okay? Because if you spend all your time worrying and being anxious about getting tenured and promotion, it's going to drive you nuts and you're going to be a very miserable person for the next 3, 4, 5 years. Okay? Know what you need to do. Focus on that. Produce. And as long as you do that, no problem. I was tenured and promoted here in 1987. I arrived in 1982. I was made full professor in 1992. Okay? It's the 10-year plan. I never worried about it because I knew what my vita looked like. I knew that I was productive and nobody could argue about it. And I didn't have, I wouldn't say everybody in my department was my best friend. I made some enemies along the way, okay? Because sometimes I can't keep my mouth shut. It sort of happens. That's the second bit of advice that Jim didn't tell you here, is that sometimes you sort of got to learn the lay of the land and feel your way through it a little bit, okay? But they couldn't argue with the data. They couldn't argue with the data. So produce the data. Another thing that Jim said was really important, this notion of balance. Your life just isn't simply about your work. Your work is very important to you. It's important to all of us. But you have to have a life. And if you don't go out and get that renewal and get rejuvenated, the work is going to suffer. Some of you may have read Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. The 7th step is called sharpening the saw. If you're a woodcutter and you're simply sawing away and never sharpening your saw, you're not going to be able to cut wood for very long. You've got to take time for that renewal. You get that from family, you get that from church, you get that from other resources that you may have. Draw upon those resources. Find that balance, whatever it may be for you, okay? I had a colleague in the department who was married and divorced 4 times, okay? Jim and I have been married to the same, well, no, we haven't. No, we haven't been married to the same women, but... Yeah. There's things that Chris hasn't told you, Jim. I've been married for 37 years. You've been married for what, 60?
Yeah, close.
Okay, about 40 years, okay. And you don't last that long in a relationship unless you find that kind of balance. And we both have had tremendous support from our spouses. And you need to realize that that other person has needs too, and has a life, and has aspirations. And so you've got to find a way to compromise that. So think about that at the very beginning and find your way through that roadmap. So I want to thank Jim again for that. Really, I was inspired by the talk. I want to go up for tenure and promotion all over again. So Jim laid out a general overview of where we're going, and now we're starting the specific parts of it. And I've got the pleasure of talking to you about the TP, or teaching philosophy. I want to go review with you just a few of our goals, what we're going to do. We're going to do a lot of work. Okay, we're going to do a lot of work. I'm going to shut up quite a bit of the time, and you're going to be followed through some assignments. So let's go through the overview. I want you to think about what it is you do as a teacher. What kind of activities do you engage in? What kind of activities do you expect your students to engage in? How do you interact with those students? What are your goals, not only as a teacher, but for those students as learners? You can't be a teacher unless you have learners. They go hand in hand. So what is it that you're trying to create for them? What kind of partnership do you want with them? You all know where you are now. You have had a year at Auburn University under your belts as a teacher in one way or another. Okay? What have you done well? What have you excelled at? What have your students enjoyed? What have you struggled with? What kinds of things, if you could go back and do this year over again in terms of your teaching, would you do over again? Okay. What have you learned? What have you learned? I want to be able to have you think about what it is to have a philosophy of teaching. What does it mean to teach? What does it mean to learn? Okay. What is your plan for teaching and learning in the future? Now, if you take a look in your big book, on pages 11 through 14, Jim is giving you some pretty good ideas of answers to those kinds of questions. And although we won't be going through this part of the booklet in my section of this workshop today, the retreat today, I do want you to pay attention to that because I think there's some good ideas in there. So I'm going to put you to work right away. I want you to think about your teaching and what your goals are. You go to page 2 in my handout. Looks like this. I'd like you to sort of make a bulleted list of 2 things. What are your strengths as a teacher, and what are your weaknesses? I'll give you about 5-6 minutes to do that, and then I'm going to ask you to discuss those with the people at your table. So I want you to discuss your strengths as well as your weaknesses.
So are we doing the page 2 thing or page 3 strengths and weaknesses?
Holy cow. Oh, you know what happened? Oh, excuse me. I started out a bad day. Let me tell you how my day started. My wife normally goes to work about 7 a.m. this morning. Okay, so she leaves about 6:30. And before then, we usually go for a walk with our dogs. We've got 2 wiener dogs and a mutt. But this morning, because it's the end of the semester, she's not going to go in until 2 o'clock. So I come down from downstairs, or from upstairs taking a shower. I'm getting ready to come here early in the morning. She's out walking with the dogs. I can't find the dogs in the house. Okay, I think the dogs are missing because I've forgotten our normal routine. Okay. So for 15 minutes, I'm searching for the dogs. I'm around the neighborhood, I'm calling up neighbors, I'm going frantic, okay? So I'm just sort of blah blah today, so you have to forgive me. Page 2. Thank you, Conrad, for making that correction and embarrassing me in front of everybody. I'm just teasing. That's what I say to my students when they point out an error in my teaching, so, and it always gets a really good laugh. Go over what your goals are. Okay, just make a list of what you want to accomplish as a teacher. And then when we're done with that, we'll talk about our strengths and weaknesses. And again, I apologize for that misdirection. Okay, I hate to interrupt this. This is great. So what are some of your goals? What are some of the things that you discussed? Not everybody at once.
I would talk about the difficulty of teaching classes that students don't want to take. Oh, gosh.
Could you say that just a little bit louder for me, please?
A few of us teach classes that students don't want to take or don't. What'd you come up with?
Okay.
There's no
Okay.
answer.
So your goal in that is what?
I think we talked about it, to stir up enough interest focused on how you're actually going to use
Okay.
what our content is.
Okay. So you want to sort of increase student interest, increase student engagement.
Yeah, make sure they see what the point is.
Okay. So the second one would be to show them the value of whatever it is that the class is about. Okay.
I would say one of the important things was how we can simplify these complex mathematical
Okay.
things so
Okay.
that they get interested. Because sometimes just by looking at the math, they're like, I'm not
Right.
taking this course.
Okay.
Or they are there because they have to take it.
Right.
So breaking that ice is one important.
Okay. Simplifying the course, changing their attitude about the course, particularly if you have sort of stuff that's heavy mathematical in content, there's already a fear coming in. So you have to take them through a little bit of therapy in order to get them to where they want to go. Okay? And we got the therapist in the middle of the table? Okay? Okay. Good start. Thank you very much. Other goals?
Well, in our group, we had a really interesting discussion about the differences in our overall philosophy and our overall goals for our teaching. And one of the big ones was my goals were kind of more big picture, and these two guys, they had more of a structured, focused, observable, and measurable set of goals. So we found that to be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, it is very interesting.
We did find some overlap between what we had there.
Well, okay, let's start there then. What is your general goal, and then let's move to the specific goals here.
Oh, so one of the general goals that I had is to inspire students to want to pursue more learning.
Okay, so sort of lifelong learning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, you guys come across that too? Nodding heads. And part of that is getting them interested and showing them the value of not only the content, but the value of actually learning. Okay, because this is something many students have taken for granted for so long. You know, they almost think that they're sponges. They're just going to soak it up. But it's a little bit more work than that. Okay. So what are the specific goals?
Well, I think each and every one of us found that we do want to instill a specific way of thinking in our students that is discipline specific. So it can be a thinking in a mathematical way or as a critical reading of stuff. So we do want to make them think like a engineer, a physical chemist, think as someone.
Heaven forbid. Okay? Heaven forbid they learn to think like that. So yeah, so for each of us, we are going to have very specific goals that are related to our discipline, and that's necessary to be accomplished in that discipline. One of them may be mathematical thinking, maybe thinking critically, maybe thinking like an engineer, or be thinking like a playwright. I mean, there's different ways to break down that kind of thing, but whatever it is, okay, it's got to be focused on the discipline. Okay, so that's good. But by doing these kinds of things, going after these specific goals, you can still have that overarching goal of having students be a lifelong learner in that. Okay?
Right.
Particularly if they can become comfortable, if you can help them become at ease with taking these very complex topics, whatever they may be, breaking them down so that they can have the confidence then. And this is what many students really lack, is they lack confidence in themselves. And if you just sort of slap them up like they've been slapped up all their lives, they're not going to go anywhere. Okay? So part of it is taking the time to step back, seeing what needs to be done here to help these students get to where they need to get. Okay? And you're in the best position to do that than anybody. Okay? So these are all very good ideas. See how they're all nicely dovetailing together? Okay? Good. Let's do a couple more.
I really want to facilitate or foster synthesis of material, because I get them when they're interning and they don't necessarily, I'm in music education, and they don't necessarily think about the music classes they took when they're actually in a rehearsal setting and working with a band or chorus. So and then I bring it up and they're like, oh yeah, I did that in theory class, you know? So I'm really looking for that, trying to foster that synthesis or facilitate it.
This is a really good point that you're making here, is that you're no longer dealing with sort of the younger students here. You're taking your students who now have some experience, and they've got experience in this class, and that class, and this class, and that class, and now what you want to do is get them to see the big picture by bringing it all together. And a lot of times we are able to do that in a capstone course in some disciplines, but not every discipline has a capstone course. So that it falls upon individual teachers like yourself to pull that together. Okay? And that's sort of the culmination of the groundwork that everybody is laying here so far with the very specific disciplinary goals. So bringing those ideas together. Very good. Very good.
So I work with doctoral students mostly, so what I want for them is kind of what she was saying, but I also want them to be able to, one, see their patient as a person and create an individualized program rather than just a rote set of steps. And in that, when they're doing their diagnostic testing, I want them to be able to assess why they're doing each test, not because that's the way Auburn said to do it, but because it has a clinical value to each patient. So that's kind of what I'm trying to foster, is that they understand why they're doing it and why they're doing it on an individual basis with each patient.
Yeah, Kelly's making a really interesting point here, I think. This is an old movie, and some of you I'm sure have heard of it. Have you ever heard of An Officer and a Gentleman? You know, you can make somebody an officer, but you cannot necessarily make him a gentle person, okay? And this is sort of what you're saying, is that, you know, we're producing these students to go out there and perform specific tasks as if they're only a technician. And that is, follow this recipe here, follow this set of steps here, and it's going to work. Don't worry about the person. I mean, I think that's why when all of us go to a physician who finally will talk to us and treat us as an individual, we feel so good about that particular doctor, and we create, there's some loyalty that's been created there, okay? So what we're doing here with our students is that we're not only creating young professionals, but we're also helping them become better human beings by seeing the value of what they do and trying to take time to understand people. And that's true of whatever discipline we're in. Jay.
I teach graduate school, graduate students, but there are few undergraduate students who come and take the class.
Right.
And these are sometimes first year and second year. So my goal is one fixed, but my outcomes of that goals are different. How? Because students are different. So how does one deal with that?
I don't think there's any specific way to deal with the fact that you're in a situation where you have students who you have different goals for. I mean, some are grad students, some are undergraduate students. They're in the same course. The way I've seen those courses tailored, and correct me if I'm wrong over here at the Brain Trust table, but usually there's a different set of requirements for each set of students in there, and so the goals are a little bit different. But the great thing about that kind of course, and I really like those kind of courses, is because you can use those graduate students in that course as resources to serve as role models for what professionalism is like for these undergraduate students. You can sort of get them to step their game up a notch. And that sort of goes with what Kelly's saying behind the scenes, is that you're really, what we're really doing here is creating young professionals. And it means both having a particular set of skills and being able to have rapport, what it means to be a professional and get along with other people. So, anybody else want to add anything? Shana.
Something which worked for my classes, I told them that it's not that you are only learning from me, but I'm also learning from you. So I make them, like mine is climate change, which is very controversial, so I make them send me links and papers and make them search them out and then discuss in class, so which is kind of, they always feel that it's, even they are teaching me something as well as the whole class.
Right.
Kind of adding a value to the whole thing in the course,
Yeah.
which kind of helped me.
You know, this is a really interesting perspective that can catch a lot of people off guard. You do have to ask yourself, what's in it for me? And it's not selfish, because it's what keeps you motivated, okay? And it's nice to be able to come to class and say, whoa, wow, I didn't know that. Where did you find that out? And have that kind of genuine awe and surprise that models sort of the joy of discovery. And when students can show that they can be resources for you like that, that turns them on. It makes them feel really good about what they're contributing to. So that's also a good goal, okay, is to learn while you're teaching. Okay. So many times, and you guys have seen me do this a number of times, so many times we think that it's only just one way. You know, from my head to his head. But a true educational experience is going to be bidirectional. Going to be bidirectional. Thanks. I've asked Ahmad to take a few notes, and what I'm going to ask him to do is to sort of stand up and summarize, okay, what we've talked about so far, so we don't miss anything. Because as you're thinking about, you know, what your teaching philosophy is going to be, maybe what you want to do is steal some of these other ideas. The first rule of being a great teacher is being a great thief. Okay.
Okay. Well, most of the comments actually we're going around the learning, the value of learning. Many of you actually mentioned it in one way or another. To have the students show the value of the class or long life learning, to inspire students for long life learning through also learning the value of learning, or making think as more mathematicians or engineers with focus on discipline to increase through the increasing of the confidence in themselves, putting all the what they're learning all together like in a sort of a capstone, so they would also value why they're learning this and what the benefits of all of what they're learning in their other classes. Yeah, show the value of learning was mainly the main thing for what almost everybody says. You need to give your students to value learning itself.
Right. Okay, thanks for summarizing that. I appreciate it. So the question becomes, how good are you at this? Okay. How well are you accomplishing the goals? Now, I know a lot of you have more goals than what we were able to talk about. Okay, you've got a list here. Okay, have you been successful?
How do you document that?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about. Okay. That's what we're going to talk about. Okay. Okay. The short answer is that there is no single one way to document anything we're talking about. Okay, there's not like I got a magic box here I can give to you. Okay, but a lot of things will be incidental. A lot of things will be letters you receive from alumni who've taken your courses, who testify to the benefits of taking the course. An email you get from a student who says, you know, you really inspired me to go beyond and learn something. I didn't really think I was going to like this class, and now this is what I want to do. I'm changing my major. These are the kinds of things that you save and you can document. And then you can put those in the appendices that Jim was talking about in the academic portfolio. And you can also use that when you're writing your materials. You can actually quote from students like that. So that's one simple way to do it. Okay. I mean, in the end, we're all about numbers, right? Okay, and there's some things that you just sort of can't quantify. So I mean, think about how many students we've had. I've totaled them up this week. I've taught just shy of 35,000 Auburn University undergraduates. Okay. How many of those students have written me letters saying wonderful things about me?
5.
And they were on drugs when they did it. No, you know, very, very few of those. But you're right. I mean, some very small percentage. And so it's not like, you know, you're going to be dripping with these kinds of data. Most of the time, we're looking in terms of grade distributions, those kinds of things, to show that students have met learning outcomes. There are assessments that you can do. You can do pre-test, post-tests in a class. So if you have a particular goal that you have a specific student learning outcome that you want students to be successful at achieving, you can do a pre-test, post-test, something like that. Okay? You can make sure that your examinations and quizzes and papers test for those kinds of things. So, you know, I mean, when you're talking about course design, you've got to say, okay, where am I going to start? And where you start is with your SLOs. Okay? And then you've got to figure, okay, now how am I going to teach those? Okay? How am I going to test students? How am I going to measure? Okay? How do I know that measurement is going to reflect actually what they learn? So it's a very complicated question that you raise. Okay? So now finally, we're going to get to page 3. Okay? And we're going to talk about what it is we do well and what it is we don't do too well. Okay? Now, think partially in terms of these goals we were talking about. Also think about your own self-assessment, what you've read on the course evaluations that you've received. Maybe if I've talked to you as a result of a peer consultation, an SGIF, think about some of the things we talked about. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses as a teacher? Okay. We want to build on the strengths and we want to reduce the weaknesses. But I will tell you, and Jim will testify to this too, particularly when it comes to me, I have a lot of weaknesses. And I've been doing this for 30 years. Okay? I'm still finding new ways to do it. I'm still amazed when I read a student evaluation who criticizes me in a way I've never been criticized before, and I'll say, I didn't know that. I can't believe I've missed that after all this time. We're always, as Jim said earlier, a work in progress. Okay? So take about 5 minutes to think about those. And your weaknesses out loud. Okay. We want to acknowledge them. We want to own them. We want to change them. go through this pretty quickly. What are some of the strengths that we have in this room as teachers? Anybody?
I'm really organized for class.
Organized for class. And what's your discipline?
Engineering.
Engineering, okay. Okay. Organized.
I can go on explaining to a student if they ask questions. Like I said, climate change and things is so dynamic, and I've spent like 10, 15, 20 minutes on one single topic for a long time. So I'm patient.
Okay, patience, and there's another thing, willing to help. That's in between the lines there, willing to help. Okay, good.
My students like that I had a real world experience. So I didn't come straight from academia. I spent 3 years practicing it in ear, nose, and throat practice. And so I have legitimate cases of where the tests I'm teaching have been needed.
So you've got practical experience in the real world that you can sort of enliven the class with. Okay, very good, very good. Anything from this table?
Enthusiasm.
You're enthusiastic.
I like
Okay.
what I do and it shows.
Like what you do and it shows, okay? When you take a look at the teaching literature, and you take a look across all of it, there's only one common element across all the studies that have ever been done for the last 100 years. Enthusiasm. Passion. Absolutely. You can't hide it if you have it, okay? And students know that, okay? So passion.
I think you do a pretty good job of taking complex kind of theoretical ideas and putting it in simple terms as students.
Pretty good job.
Pretty good job. Pretty good job. I could do better.
Okay,
but yes,
yeah.
it's something I
Okay.
do well.
So you do a fantastic job, okay, making complex material understandable.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what we were talking about before, the trick to do that, was a goal to do that, okay? Very good. Anybody?
Flexible?
Flexible. And what do you mean by flexible? You change grades at a moment's notice, or?
No, not yet. Having an agenda and walking into class, finding out that their needs are different and being able to adjust.
Okay. Okay, very good. Sometimes in teaching, you've got to sort of shift. It depends on what's happening in that particular class. They may not simply be prepared for what you have to say. You just sort of can't bulldoze over them. So you have to have that kind of flexibility. Okay, very good. What else do we want to add to this list of strengths?
For me, I feel like I'm a good guide on the side.
Okay.
I'm guiding the students through the education, and I prefer that over a sage on the stage.
Okay,
And I think that's what students need more.
right. Is everybody familiar with that phrase? Okay. It used to be, in the old days of higher education, that you were a sage on stage, that all the attention was focused on you, you were in front of a podium, and you were filling the room with your intelligence, and they were sitting at your footsteps, okay, just drinking of this intelligence. Now the idea, particularly with active learning coming on the scene, is the idea that what your job really is to be more of a coach and a guide on the side. Give them problems to solve, rather than simply filling their heads with your expertise, allowing them to learn things on their own and make mistakes and providing that feedback. Good. Other ideas?
I'm good at starting from what they need, not
Okay.
just knowledge-wise, but how are they actually going to use this and then try to figure it
Okay, so you're good at finding a starting point, right?
out where they are.
Where they are.
Why am I going to use this?
Right.
Why do I need to know this? And I try to
So you have a way also of finding how things have an application. Okay, very good. You can read that. Okay. Okay.
When I had a design student in my stats class, I said, how do you use stats in your field? She told me.
Okay. So you ask questions. Okay, good. Do we want to add anything else?
I feel like I incorporate multiple learning styles because each student doesn't learn the same way. So I try to make sure that I'm doing visual, I'm doing auditory, I'm doing some hands-on kinesthetic kind of things to make sure that I'm reaching each student.
So you're providing a lot of variability in the way you present information, okay? So, and sometimes you might even be repeating it. So you may present one visually and then come auditorily and present it as well, and then give them a problem to solve that reinforces all that.
Also, I like to incorporate humor into education.
Okay, a little bit of sense of humor, it helps.
Sure.
It helps. Now, the thing is that you can't teach anybody to have a sense of humor. So it's something you really have developed or you're not, but you can find ways to be funny in the sense of you can bring funny cartoons into class, you can ask students for funny comments or funny stories, those kinds of things. So there's a lot of ways to bring that in. Good.
Building rapport with your students, getting to know them.
Building rapport.
As possible.
Building rapport, okay? And rapport involves What? What is rapport?
Knowing the names.
Yeah.
Knowing their names?
Who they are, having that
Okay.
Listening.
Yeah. Okay, there's a social connection here. Okay, building rapport. Good. You'll find in that vast teaching literature I was talking to you about, when you take a look at factor analytic studies that have broken down the components that go into what we would call, for lack of a better word, master teaching, there are only two. And it's been replicated probably 30 times. There's the pedagogical skills, and there's the rapport skills. Okay? Enthusiasm falls under rapport. Okay? It sets the context. Jay.
When I was a student and when I was taking classes, if the teacher was good, I wouldn't care if he's socially linked to me, if he likes me or not. So in real life, as a teacher, I know this is important, but how much really should we focus too much on? And
Okay, the question is how much should we focus on developing a social relationship with our students as opposed to simply teaching them? Let me answer this question by saying this. Teaching is a social behavior. It is fundamentally social. It is about a relationship that you're forming with your students. So that kind of context is important. That doesn't mean that your students won't learn from you if you're an SOB. Okay? They will still learn from you. But they may not enjoy the process as much. And if they don't enjoy the process as much, they may never meet that goal of becoming a lifelong learner. Because what you're doing is sort of turning them onto it. So you can be a jerk, or you can be a kind person. Having good rapport doesn't mean going out and drinking with your students or going to parties. It simply means being a nice person, saying hi. Glad to see you in class today, Jay. How was your weekend? Something as simple as that, you know. And you do that over the course of the semester with every student a couple of times. They're thinking, this teacher really has an interest in me, knows my name. I need to be in class because no longer am I anonymous, okay? I feel a little bit responsible now to my teacher because he or she knows who I am. So that has that kind of power to it. Okay, it's really interesting. So I wouldn't say devote all your energies to becoming a social creature, but develop some of them. And that's simply just being a nice person, being a good person. Be tough when you have to be tough, otherwise be nice. Okay.
Just follow up on Jay's thing. Has everyone here heard the name of Richard Feynman, famous physicist? Many of you may have heard if you're in the sciences. Feynman, very famous. Okay. In 1965, when he won the Nobel Prize in Physics, two other people also shared the Nobel Prize in Physics with him. I had one of the other two as my physics professor, okay? Just as brilliant, but a real jerk, okay? And no one really, even though his contributions to physics were quite up there, no one remembers his name. His name was Julian Schwinger. But Feynman, just because he had built rapport at all levels with people.
Yeah, good point.
Through his physics. Feynman's name, you go into the best-selling section of any bookstore, you'll see a bunch of books about Feynman. Nobody's ever written or anything else about Schwinger besides, you know, his work in QED.
Yeah,
So,
that's a good point. Yeah.
so do you want to be a Feynman or a Schwinger?
The choice is all yours. Thanks, that's a really good comment. Really good comment. And I think that's how you sort of build an enduring career. And I think that's how you're remembered. Okay. Let's take a look at the downside now a little bit, okay? What are some of the weaknesses that we find among us? Okay. First hand up.
Oh, yeah, I'm weak.
I'm Lisa, and I got a problem.
Well, I'm in two departments, so the expectation level that is set for the students in the different departments are different, and I didn't pick up on it soon enough in my first semester.
Okay. Well, you're in a very unique situation.
Yeah.
I mean, most people don't have 2 appointments.
Right.
Okay.
So learning the culture of the particular classroom you're teaching
Good point.
is not one of my strengths.
Okay.
I'll admit it.
Okay.
Point blank.
Good. Learning the culture of the classroom related to the discipline. And that goes right along with learning the culture in your department. Okay? They're not always one and the same, but there's often an overlap. Okay? Good start.
Mine goes right along with that I learned this semester from my group evaluation thing that I'm not very good at communicating my philosophy for the teaching. And once I did that sort of mid-semester with the class, things really clicked.
What a difference.
They appreciated what I was trying to do with homeworks and exams and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Without knowing it, they were kind of, I had high expectations that they didn't get.
Right.
And once they understood why I had them and how they were working, it worked so much better.
This is a good point.
Can I just applaud for small group instructional feedback?
Thank you. I
Yeah.
just goofed on the name.
Yeah, okay. So communicating not only your expectations, but just sort of communicating in general with your students, what's going on in the class. And I think what you said was really important is the why. I mean, students will buy into anything if there's a good explanation for it. And so you could be a downright ogre, and you can get away with it if your students can understand your reasoning behind it. Okay.
I think it's a lot easier on the clinical floor for me to teach. I think when it comes to giving lectures, I think the problem, we have so much information to convey to them, and we want to get every little bit in when we have the chance to speak to them, that finding that nice balance between an organization of lectures, between providing the information that's necessary for them, but not overwhelming them or losing them
Right.
is a difficult thing.
So yeah, making the choice of what you're going to cover, how much you're going to cover in a particular class is a really important decision. It's a tough one to struggle with. And it really, again, it's one of those questions where there's no one single answer to it. And you sort of have to find your peace with it, wherever it may be. Okay. I can tell you, though, you'll never find peace by cramming everything down their throats. No way. Good one.
I think I need to take more risks with the low structure. That's what we're doing next year.
Okay, repeat that for me. For some reason, I'm having a hard time picking up on your voice.
Normally I project very well. That's one of my strengths. Taking risks with pedagogy, like
Okay.
low structure
Okay.
teaching methods.
Taking risks with pedagogy.
See, I think I do too much lecture. I hate it, they hate it.
Okay, yeah, you want to deviate from lecture, you want to branch out into a few things, okay? These are all really interesting issues that we're talking about here.
I struggle getting written feedback back to my students in a timely manner. So grading reports, especially long reports.
Yeah.
I struggle grading them and get it back to them in a timely manner.
Yeah, okay. So providing feedback to students in a timely manner, okay? Good.
Mine is, sometimes it's a strength for me, being international. Sometimes it's a weakness. So I am very open with the whole fact that, hey, I'm international and there's certain things, which I may not know. I mean, I don't always tell it out in class, but they understand. So it's kind of a kind of unsaid communication going on between me and the students, and I'm pretty open. But sometimes understanding the American culture goes against me. So it's a football season, and I don't really understand that. I would rather explain something on cricket because I'm from India. And so, those kind of things, I don't know exactly, but I should have had that in the middle, like strength and weakness both.
Well,
Played for and against me.
There's no doubt that, being from a different culture is going to be a strength, and that people are going to be curious, they're going to find out lots of interesting things about the culture, incidentally, just in addition to what they're finding out about whatever you might teach.
Right, but it helps me with when I come up with examples from somewhere from South Asia or anything. I mean, they love it because that's something which is very new to them.
Absolutely.
So that's strength.
Yeah. But learning how to read the culture.
Yes, because undergrads are very U.S. centric. So
Right.
when they get examples from outside of the world, and it's geography.
Right.
So it's more about a
Yeah.
global thing. So that's a strength for me.
Yeah.
But sometimes when I know I should, some kind of joke about football or something about somebody, and I don't know what to say, and I'm like a fool, I'm standing and smiling, and they're joking about it, anything about that.
Yeah.
That's kind of a weakness for me.
Yeah. But
Maybe over the years,
it's probably more of a weakness.
I think people see you as real.
Yeah.
I do that.
I tell them I'm a nerd, so sometimes I don't know things.
Yeah.
I feel like a different culture is being a math person.
Yeah, like I joke about, I know something about the real football, like the soccer, they laugh and we joke about it, but then sometimes I really feel like, I should really go back and Google and learn something about US football,
No, it's good. It's good. It's very good.
I felt the same as Chandna. What I use my GA to feed me. So they will give me 2 sentences which I can talk about in the class about a previous game. And actually it helped me. Because then I can break the tie, and then a game was played a night before, so everyone is so charged and they are returning back from Tuscaloosa or whatever. Then I spend these 2 sentences. And I don't want to spend more. It works.
Well, so there's the teaching tip of the day right there, okay? Just, fake it. I think one of the things you'll find that as you, whether we're talking about being from a different culture or being from the same general culture but dealing with local subcultures, if you show an interest in the other culture in which you're engaged, what you'll find is you'll find a way to break that ice, I think, pretty easily. Because people want to be responded to, and they like it when you want to find things out about them. So in your chit-chat before class, or your chit-chat after class, or in an office hour or something like that, if you can sort of show that kind of interest and convey it in a genuine way, then what you're doing is you're sort of breaking down some of those barriers. You're learning more about that culture so that you can understand some of that subtext, and you'll be able to adapt to later classes a little bit better that way. So those are all really good points. We've hit a number of weaknesses, and we all have them. There's not a person in here, including myself, that does not have a teaching weakness. And that's one reason I want to do this exercise. I want you to acknowledge it, and I want you to acknowledge it publicly. And you should not be afraid of having a weakness, okay? If you're afraid, you'll never address it. What you want to do is figure out what these are, and then figure out a way, either talking to your colleagues or sort of, taking the risk and discovering it on your own, of how to solve these kinds of problems. One of the reasons why the Bigio Center exists is to solve these kinds of issues. And I can't tell you, you're looking over here at 4 people. There's a lot of expertise at this table. I mean, there's a lot of expertise. Raj is looking around. There's 3 people at this table who have a lot of expertise. And let me tell you, they have probably seen almost everything that is possible to see. Because among them, there's probably, 100 years of experience. Dealing with these. 75 right here, yeah. Okay. Please.
I have a question about leniency with grades. So my basic concept is that I'm not miser with grades. I don't care because I want them to learn, so I don't mind giving them, good grades. But then there is this the ones who are 2 points less than the C or the B. So I feel I should, because sometimes I don't know. That's kind of a decision which I'm even like yesterday or day before I was kind of thinking, should I get these 2 points? And I want to, but then, there's a clash of philosophy here where I don't know what to do, but I'm lenient. That's my philosophy. I would like to give them the points.
Yeah.
But then should I and should I not? And then because I know when the undergrads, especially undergrads, they're always talking behind, and we are all new, so they're still yet to judge what kind of a person I am. So what should be the...
I can't give you a definitive answer for yourself. I can only tell you what I do. And what I do is I set a very strict standard. Because what happens is if you give this person 2 points and that person is only a half a point behind that person, then that person now becomes only a half point from the next grade. And so there's a sliding scale all the time. And in the interest of fairness, you just have to set it definitively. And I tell my students in my syllabus, and I tell them the first day of class, and I warn them throughout the semester that there is no rounding. That I don't care how hard you've worked, if you haven't achieved this many points, you're not going to get that C, you're not going to get that B, you're not going to get the A. It's a strict cutoff. And every year, and I tell them, I say, don't promise me to walk my dogs for me, don't tell me that you're going to bake me cookies, because it's not going to work. You have to set that very strict cutoff. Otherwise, I could develop a reputation for being a pushover. And I want my classes to mean something. So I'm not an ogre about it. I give them many, many opportunities to earn points, including 5% of the final grade is extra credit. And if they haven't earned it by then, I'm not going to give it to them. I've done everything I can to help them. So it's tough.
It's a related question, because Nate and I work with honors students who are kind of in their first and second years. They are extremely focused on grades. They're
Right.
not really all AP students anyways, but they're on scholarships, a lot of them. There's an immense amount of pressure on them. They're very focused on points. And we try to be very clear about how everything is allocated in terms of reaching their grades, but how do you get them to move beyond focusing so heavily on those points and get them to focus more on the learning process?
Okay, so the question is grades versus learning. They're not always the same. And I've taught honors students myself, and I know exactly what you're talking about. I love working with them because they're so motivated. And I take a very different approach to these kinds of classes than I do other kinds of classes. The first half of the class is all content, okay? And I give them 3 chances on every quiz, and I take them 3 chances on the final exam, okay? So that sort of puts the grade at ease. Then the last half of the semester, we take what we've learned the first half of the semester and we apply it to or developing a solution or approach to a solution to a world problem using psychological principles. So it's all project focused. And what happens is you find they get so engaged, they get lost, and they forget even why they're in this class anymore. And I've had marvelous success with that approach.
So all the grading happens in the first.
All the grading happens here, and then there's a term paper, a group term paper, with 2 different rubrics, one for an individual grade, one for a group grade, and then there's a poster session that I buy everybody pizza and sodas, and they put over the papers, they distill it down into a poster, and then we have a poster session the last day of class. And they're so focused on putting together this poster and writing this paper, they're not worried about their grade anymore because they've got immersed in the idea. What you've got to do is make the class interesting and engaging so it takes them away from everything else. Okay? Now, you're always going to have the few people who are going to be just absolutely nuts about those grades. You just have to tell them to chill out. You got to say, you're going to live a very short life if you're just this focused, you know. Come up for air every now and then. And you just have to hit them over the head. The problem is, if you do that and I do that, and we're the only 2 in the universe to do that, that's not going to be reinforced. We've got to sort of build that culture among our colleagues to have that kind of reaction to it as well. So, we sort of moved far afield here, okay? But this is okay, because this is what we're here to talk about. And it does relate to how you approach your philosophy of teaching. So I'm going to ask Ahmad very briefly to summarize both the strengths and the weaknesses we've heard so far, and then I'm going to give you 2 more quick exercises to do, and then we're going to call it a day.
First, I want to let you know that coordinating the small group instructional feedback where you get your mid-semester formative evaluation of the Big U Center. So I've been doing this over and over and over with the strengths and weaknesses. So I thought it might be done, but it's still probably hunting me down the door.
And Ahmad's been doing a lot of the typing up of the comments and helping us out.
Well, it seems it's the same comments everywhere. It's the strengths, including being organized, willing to help, connect to practice with experience in the field to the classroom. This one seems one of the very important strengths is actually being enthusiastic, passionate about teaching, flexible, understanding students' needs, and maybe working accordingly, facilitating, encouraging active learning, encouraging student participation, asking questions, and use different teaching styles to cover the different learning styles. Teaching methods, different teaching methods to cover learning styles. Using humor, stories in the classroom, and building rapport. This is exactly all the strengths that probably I see all the time. For the weaknesses, this will come a little bit different. Not learning the culture of the classroom, I haven't seen this very common, but it's probably people probably don't realize it's a weakness, so I probably don't mention it. Because I usually see it from the student's perspective. Probably don't see it that way.
Now, let me stop you there. He's making a really interesting point here. A lot of times the students don't perceive the issues that you're bringing up. You've got a unique perspective on this now. So a lot of it is sort of self-imposed. Okay? In other words, in your case, culture may not be that big of an issue from your student's point of view, but you're feeling it because you feel a little bit awkward in those kinds of situations. So it becomes a personal thing, but you're hiding it pretty well because I've seen you teach twice now. You know, you're very outgoing. You're very, very engaged with the class like that. Nobody would ever know that you were hiding this sort of awkwardness underneath it all. So you do a good job at that.
Well, not communicating teaching expectation, this is the same thing because probably students would not understand what you're doing, so they probably interpret this in a different way, saying, well, it's too much load, too much stuff, whatever. Deciding how much to cover, somebody mentioned that. Not taking risk with pedagogy, I'm not sure, but students probably would not feel like that either. Timely feedback, that's something that faculty and students agree upon, definitely. The cultural barriers, which I'm probably still say, don't realize this is a problem, or it's something else. You know?
Right.
They mention it in a different way. But that was all.
Okay, good, thanks. That's a really good summary, I think, of what we've been talking about so far. Okay. So we've talked about what our goals have been. We've talked about what our strengths and weaknesses are vis-a-vis those goals, and then we've brought it out to a larger arena. I'm going to ask you now to go engage in a fourth and then a fifth exercise. I want you to do this next exercise really quickly, okay? Really quickly. Don't read directions, okay? Really quickly. I want you to think of the best teacher you've ever had as an undergraduate. And I want you to write down the 3 characteristics or behaviors that that person possessed as fast as you can. You got 1 minute.
Up to today?
Yes. Everybody done? Okay, what'd you come up with? What? Challenging. Okay.
Interactive, and then they were nice, good rapport with the students.
Okay. But challenging was the first thing that came out of your mouth, okay? Challenging. Appropriately so. Okay, good.
In-depth knowledge of the subject.
Okay, you got to be knowledgeable. That's a given. You got to be knowledgeable. You can't teach unless you have that knowledge. Okay?
Make boring things interesting.
Okay, make the class interesting. Make the class interesting. What seemed to be boring, you know, a lot of students sort of dread the course, but it turns out to be interesting after all.
It's going to sound a little funny, but a kind of nuttiness in the creativity that had this,
Okay.
kind of related, this very can-do creativity to it. That was
Okay.
just a...
Now, I've been doing this exercise for about 15 years with different groups, and I've never heard the word nutty mentioned. Okay? But I guess there is a movie, The Nutty Professor?
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah.
There's sort of an originality or creativity, as you said, that you bring to the classroom, sort of a fresh approach to it.
I wrote
Quirky,
quirky.
okay. Quirky can be good within certain bounds, okay. Yeah, you know, you can't be an outlier. You sort of got to be, you know, statistically there in the middle, okay. Good. Anything back there?
Believe in students, believe in their potential.
You got to see the potential in students. You believe in the potential of students, okay. In other words, they're not just simply empty vessels out there. You got to believe that, but with the knowledge you're going to give them, that they have the power to do something with it. And again, that's another way of instilling that kind of confidence that students really lack these days, okay.
I wrote genuine as well.
Genuine.
Real authentic.
Genuine. If you read Stephen Brookfield, who's one of a handful of really, really well-known authorities on higher education, he talks about that kind of authenticity. Okay, you got to be the real you. You can't be somebody that you're not, and that's a very important part of your teaching philosophy. You can't copy someone else because Jim may be a master teacher, but he's a master teacher because he possesses a unique constellation of qualities, okay, that you may not possess. So what makes one person a master teacher is not the same thing that makes another master teacher. Okay. Anybody else?
Gave time, a lot of time. My cello teacher would sometimes spend 2 hours with me, so I could get
Okay.
the concept he was talking about. So it's not only time, but it's making sure I'm successful.
Okay, 2 things there. Okay, willingness to spend time with your students, and 2, doing whatever it takes to help your students be successful. You remember Mr. Holland's Opus? Did you ever see the movie?
Yeah.
Okay, a long time ago. Okay, probably you were about 3 or 4 years old when you saw
Exactly.
that. Okay, but that's a great example of somebody who would take anything he possibly could to help a student learn. Okay, very good point. Anybody else?
Respecting students that they are new to the material, so do not expect too much in the beginning itself.
Now, say that, I'm not sure I quite understand you. Say it a little bit differently.
It's being patient even with their minor questions.
Okay,
So if they ask, you should be able to explain them well.
right.
And then respect that they are new to the material. So no prejudice, no already preconceived.
Okay. That second point he made is a really clear and very perfect point. And that is, this is new to them. It's not new to you. And so you have to come in with that same kind of enthusiasm day in and day out for this stuff because it's new to them. But even though it's just ho-hum to you. So sometimes you sort of got to get yourself psyched up in order to get into that classroom. So you need to take the time to do that. You need to have that prep time before a class to do that. That's a great point. Okay. One more point. high expectations, set the standard high. That goes along with being challenging, but appropriately so. There's a difference between being challenging and having high standards, simply be tough as nails, and the other, as opposed to simply setting high standards because it's really important and necessary and providing your students a way to get there. Okay? All these things we've mentioned here now are things to strive for. So when you think about what is your approach to teaching, how many of these kinds of things that we just talked about are going to enter into that? Okay. How many of you can sit and begin to draft your teaching philosophy and talk about the importance of setting high standards? Okay. Or being enthusiastic, or creating a confident student, or bringing some freshness and originality. What does that mean? How does that translate into your actions in the classroom? David said earlier that he believes his strongest quality is being enthusiastic. Okay, what does that mean? How is one enthusiastic? How does that translate into what students learn? Actually, it doesn't directly translate into what students learn. It translates into their motivation for learning. So you've got to talk about those kinds of terms. How do you measure enthusiasm? How do you measure the impact of it? Okay, being challenging and having high standards is pretty easy to do. I mean, you can talk about numbers there. Okay, but talking about quirkiness or nuttiness or whatever you want to call it is a different measure. But these are still important elements that must go into your teaching philosophy if this is what you believe about teaching. Okay? I want to explore this in one last exercise a little bit further. I want you to turn, see if I can get the page number correct, page 5. And I want you to read this. Okay? You can rip this out if you want to make it a little bit easier for you, because you're going to have to flip back and forth. This is a 28-item checklist called the Teacher's Behavior Checklist that has very sound psychometric properties. It's been used in many places as a teaching and value instrument. I use it as a self-assessment instrument. And that's what I want you to do now. I want you to self-assess yourself relative to the 28 qualities and their attendant behaviors listed on the next page. Okay? Now, these are 28 qualities that have been identified in various degrees as contributing to master level teaching, excellence in teaching. To what degree do you possess those? This will give you a good idea of what your overall picture is of yourself as a teacher, something that you can use, because I want to take some of these large, big picture ideas that we've been talking about and translate them into specific behaviors. One of the benefits of using a checklist like this is that if you find yourself getting a low score in one area, you can look in what's in parentheses after the quality, and they'll give you specific suggestions as to behaviors you can engage in to change. Okay, now I'm going to give you the bad news. Here's the bad news. If we ask your students to fill this form out for you, what we find is on the average, you will score 0.78 points below per question. Okay, so about 3/4 of a point below. We tend to be a little self-inflated, a little bit biased. They see us from a different perspective. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about those. So if you gave yourself a 5, you're really more down around a 4.23, 4.22. If you gave yourself a 3, you're more down around a, on the average, a 2. Now that's, again, that's in general. That's when we're talking about massing hundreds of these together. Look at me like this, okay?
Based on what you're saying and some of the things on here and some of the feedback that you've given other people for their questions, I feel like that if I'm accessible to the students all the time, I'm not getting my other responsibilities done. I can spend 5-6 hours a day meeting with students. So how do you balance that?
Okay. Well, this is the golden question, and this is one that all of us just scratch our heads about. I don't have any hair to scratch, I'm sorry. And that is, what is the balance among all these things that we're doing? Not just talking about between career and family, but among all the elements of our career. And again, that answer is, the minimal answer is that balance is whatever it takes to get you tenure and promoted. But that's the cold answer. The practical answer is, It's wherever you find your happiness and that you can practically do and still fulfill yourself as a person in other areas of your work and in your home life. So it's going to be unique to each one of you. And I know that that's sort of an unsatisfactory answer, but it truly is a unique perspective that you have to take on this. Myself, how I've decided to answer it is I spend the bulk of my time in the classroom and doing research on teaching. So Jim and I are not unalike in that area. I mean, we have pretty similar approaches to how we do things. That takes up functionally about 85 to 90% of my working time. And then the rest is devoted to service activities and outreach. But that's my choice. And sometimes I don't say no often enough. We really do need a workshop on how to say no once you get tenure, okay? Once you get tenured and promoted, because you don't want to say, well, you want to be selectively say no here. But that's a very, very tough thing to do. So, okay, so let me just review what we've done here. We've tried to get you to think about yourself as a teacher. That's what this has all been about. And we've explored that from a couple different angles. One is simply what it is you believe you want to try to do as a teacher. Notice we haven't talked about how you do that yet, okay? And we won't, okay? We're just big picture items right now. Then we talked about, in terms of striving for those goals, okay, how do you try to do that in terms of the skills that you possess, both in terms of what you do well and what you don't do so well. Then we asked you to sort of shoot for a higher goal, and that is, outside of yourself, what do you yourself see as those benchmarks of being outstanding teaching? And we've done that two ways. One, to think about the models that you've had come across in your careers as undergraduates. And the second is how you sort of self-assess yourself vis-a-vis a well-researched metric of excellence in teaching, which is the TVC that you had before you. Okay? So that's all background that we simply want you to sort of absorb today. As Jim said earlier, there's not a time to put together your portfolio and to actually write. But let me just take the last few minutes here of my time and give you some suggestions about now how to begin to put some of this stuff together. What a TP is simply that. It is a philosophy. It's your thoughts, it's your ideas, it's your opinions, it's your experiences, it's your views on what teaching is from your perspective. And that's all it is. It's very subjective. It is meant to be that way. Teaching is subjective. Teaching is not objective. Don't let anybody tell you different. It talks about what you teach, why you teach it, and how you teach it. These are all things that Jim mentioned earlier. Okay. Why do you see teaching as an activity worth doing? Why teach? Okay. Now, many of us, if we had to, would spend all the time in the lab. So you can't say that in your teaching philosophy. Okay. I teach because I'm forced to teach. Okay. That may be true, but that still does not mean that you should not do it well. Because you do have the chance to impact a lot of lives in very positive ways. And that's one reason why I think teaching is valuable. The power of changing others, of helping others change. There was a question earlier about the academic portfolio that you asked Jim, and that is, who's the audience for this? And the answer is the same here. There are two audiences. One is yourself, so you can use this for reflection. And the other is, those people who are going to read it when you go up for tenure promotion, when you go up for a teaching award, when you go up for your third-year review. Do what you can to blend those two together. Do what you can to be honest in the one that's going to be made public. Okay? I only have one teaching philosophy. Okay? One statement of teaching philosophy, and that's the one I use for everything. Okay? I'm not reticent at all to let people know what I think is important to teaching from my point of view. Okay? So we create an audience in your mind that is going to be able to understand what you say and make it understandable in terms of your writing and expression. It's primarily used for personal development. I keep a copy in the top drawer of my desk. And when I get depressed about teaching, when I feel like I'm losing my way in teaching like I did this semester, I pull that out and I reread it so I can reacquaint myself with my values. Because sometimes I forget. Sometimes I get a little despondent and I forget why I'm really here. Okay, we all do that. This can be something that really buoys you up in a time of need. Believe me, and I promise you, you will all come across that time in your teaching careers. As the day is long, I will promise you that. Okay. So I want you to think about your TP in terms of what we talked about earlier today, and then I want you to answer these kinds of questions. And there's a really elaborate expansion of these questions on page 7 of your handouts. Okay. What do you like as a teacher? You want to incorporate not only your personal perspective that you developed today, but you also want to talk about what your students have to say. Do you have a teaching style? Are you open, engaged? Are you interactive? Are you dynamic? Okay, those kinds of things. What do you do to strive to be dynamic? What does it mean to be dynamic? You simply can't say, I have a dynamic approach to teaching. What does that mean? What does it mean to be, I try to engage my students? And what I've done for you at the end of the handouts, you'll see 2 sample teaching philosophies. One is a student by the name of Jessica Irons. She was a student of mine. She's now an associate professor at James Madison University. Now, she mentions psychology specifically in here, but what she says generally about teaching is true for everybody. And then there's a copy of my teaching philosophy as well. And you can sort of see there's lots of different ways to organize it. I use headings. She did not. I break mine down into really short, well-organized paragraph. She has longer explanations. I once did a 4-hour TP workshop, people from different disciplines, and we had a woman from English who wrote a poem, who put her teaching philosophy in the form of a poem. And it was beautiful when she got up and read it. It was just absolutely beautiful. Back to that first question. What are my teaching objectives? Okay. If you take a look at page 7, these are from a friend of mine, Steve Davis, who's now retired. He breaks it up into 3 categories. An overview of you as a teacher. What is your style? Notice what he says. Notice the second sentence he says under style. How do you establish rapport with your students? And then finally, your teaching goals. Not just in terms of what you want to do as a teacher, but what do you want your students to achieve as well. So now it's up to you to take everything from this session that you've thought about, take it back, ponder it. Don't start right away. Wait a couple days, think about it, review your notes, review the handouts, and then begin to organize your thoughts on paper. This should be no longer than 1.5 pages to 2 pages double-spaced. Okay? Mine's a little bit elaborate. I've been around for 30 years. Mine's a little bit longer. I had a little bit more to say. Don't say anything you don't have to say. Okay? Keep it short, sweet, and to the point. Accomplish your major beliefs about teaching. In other words, express your major beliefs about teaching and how you try to function according to those.
Are there any formatting suggestions for Dossier that we have to?
I think we hit, Jim, is it a 1.5 pages teaching philosophy?
No, I think it says less than one, no more than a page.
So that's single space, though.
Single space.
That's single space. So that translates to 1.5 to 2 pages double spaced. Okay. I should have known that. I just read that. Any other questions? I'm going to turn the time back to Jim. Jay.
In teaching philosophy, the 2 variables is the teacher and the subject, or is it only the teacher?
There's 3.
The 3, okay.
There's the teaching itself, the teacher. There's the learner. And then what joins them is the content. But you're going to speak more about the teacher and the learner than you will about the content. Your content is related to something else. Okay? Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, Bill, thank you for a great overview.
Thank you.
Just throw money at it works better.
Yeah.
If you look in the booklet, the bound little booklet on page 11 through 16, there's another approach. It's kind of very similar, builds on what Bill said, but much more of a guided approach. Poses some heuristic questions, some stimulus questions, gets you to think about what your role is, what the role of a student is. So this could be a useful way of
kind of the next step between actually composing that document to developing the document. I want to add something that I have a little bit different philosophy on teaching philosophy. My philosophy on a teaching philosophy is I encourage faculty to go beyond just your beliefs, just beyond a philosophy statement. I like to encourage, if at all possible, for faculty to ground those beliefs in some evidence. In other words, if you can substantiate your belief about how people learn with some evidence, some research on human learning, I'd throw that in. If you say this is how you teach, and there's some research that supports the effectiveness of those teaching methods, I'd relate to that. I'd refer to that. So I think it's not a bad idea to go beyond just your own experience and your own beliefs, but to document, to substantiate, to cross-reference your beliefs. So it creates an idea that you've really gone beyond just a personal experience, that you've done some scholarly investigation of these issues. And your belief, your philosophy is based upon some evidence beyond just your own personal experience. So that's just a different conception of this. Everybody stand up. We have 20 minutes, and then we're going to break for lunch. So what I'm going to cover is a 2-day workshop in 20 minutes. Nice. All right? This is, and now some people can't wait for lunch, for the break. You could all have a seat again. Oops. Let me see if I can, while we're fiddling with the PowerPoint.